your hands up if you with it. Drop it.
Hi guys, it's your girl Mantate. Welcome to the first episode of the Mantate Show. This is a podcast where I talk about ideas, experiences, I ask questions. We bring in challenges, things that we deal with in this thing called life. It's a lot of how Mantate does things, a lot of how Mantate thinks about things, but I also think that through these conversations, I will be able to get a sense of how you think about the things in the way that you engage with me in comments and replies, in whatever it is that you're going to post in response to the different conversations we have. So sometimes you're going to see me on my own like today, but most of the other times you'll also see me with other people having conversations with them because, like I said, it's a space for learning. So today obviously is the first episode. Very, very excited, but also very nervous because in my mind I kept asking myself, like, what do you give to people as a first episode? How do you manage to service a very diverse community? Because I have a very diverse community around me, with me. So I'm trying to make sure that today's episode is on a topic that is important for a good number of people. So before I start, one of the most important things obviously for me is, where do you find this podcast? I think it's very important as the first episode because you guys don't know about it. So I need to tell you where to find it. But also I want you guys to subscribe to the YouTube channel because I assume you're seeing this on YouTube. If you subscribe, it means that you will get notifications when I post a new video. But it also means I'm growing my community because I want to grow my community too. So your support is very, very much appreciated. Please subscribe. Follow me as well on Instagram. I have a dedicated Instagram page called The Mantate Show. I'm going to be posting a lot of, things that are beyond just the show, a lot of things that people give us feedback that we can reflect on in the page. We'll also be, posting a couple of snippets. And then the last thing I want to mention before we start is the fact that this podcast is not just about conversations. Conversations are obviously important. I'm about that. But I think for me, the biggest thing, it might be the biggest thing of this podcast for me is really the fact that it's about conversation. It's also about style. It's about the hair. It's about the face. It's like, what are you wearing on that day? What's the vibe like? Because I feel like those are the things that I'm very passionate about. And I think it's a great opportunity to bring all of those things together. So without wasting much time, I'm going to deep dive into today's topic, which is a very interesting and necessary topic. We're talking today about life after Oxford University. And I know it sounds very, it doesn't sound like a topic that fits everybody, but you'll see how it is like a topic for everybody. So I wanted to talk about the experience of graduates after Oxford because there's a lot of misconception around, the experience at Oxford and what happens after. So I just wanted to speak into some of these misconceptions and also reflect on the realities on the ground, some of the big challenges that are faced by students. And I'm totally talking about African students today because that's the demographic that I'm part of, but it's also the kind of group that I'm most passionate about. It's young people in the continent and how we access opportunities and the way that our access to opportunities also opens doors to other young people. So we're going to be talking about African students, but obviously in the reflection, I'm going to show a little bit of the experiences that cut across the different regions. But yeah, the big picture is African students' experiences after Oxford. That's the topic for the day. So I know that if you've been an Oxford student, or if you're an Oxford student right now, you're probably thinking, go, you're talking what's on my mind, because it's a very, very big issue for a lot of people. It's something that I don't think we have enough support groups about because I think they're needed. But yeah, I think it's very exciting to talk about this today because you guys will get to have a sense of the reality, and I think it will help you think differently about how you engage students that go to Oxford and finish there, or the students that go to other universities. It doesn't have to be Oxford, but I'm using the Oxford experience because it does mirror, a lot of the experiences of other students in other similar institutions. So obviously the first thing that I want to clarify from the beginning is the idea of misconceptions. Guys, when you think about Oxford, I was in a meeting with somebody. This is someone that works in the UK that manages a very big institution and does a lot of work with universities, and they manage, London, Southeast England. So it's someone that's very influential in their own space. They work in a space where they're supporting ideas, investing in ideas. And so we're having this meeting, and one of the things that he mentioned was I was very, very inspired to see the kind of phenomenal young Africans at Oxford during the Oxford Africa conference that happened in May this year. And then he also says, it was so funny. It was so funny because it's an innocent thing, and also he doesn't know. So he says to me, I can imagine that employers are lining up to recruit students as they finish at Oxford. And I actually laughed in that moment because it's actually so funny. It's the total opposite. Like there's a general perception that when people finish at Oxford, there's, this queue of employers, queue of people that are ready to take on this talent because there is no question to the phenomenal minds that go through Oxford. The young Africans that I met there, the students that I met, not just from Africa, but it's just the caliber of students that you meet in Oxford. When you get there, it's like, it's excellence, right? It's this top tier group of young people. It's not just young people because people are across ages, right? But it's people that are amazing. They have great ideas. They're pushing amazing projects, amazing ideas. They've been doing great work in their country. So they come to the university in the UK and then they go through this 1 year, 2 years, or PhD, right? So you would think at the end that all these minds are fitting into different spaces when they're done, but it's actually not the case. And that's something that I want to talk about today because I feel like it's so, so important. And I also think it does begin to challenge people that have the capacity and the influence to create space for these young people to begin to see like it's actually not the case. When you know it's not the case, it means you might think more intentionally about the kind of spaces that you also create so that you bridge the gap. So what happens when people finish at Oxford is that I'm not going to try and explain the situation, by the way, because I feel like it's not something I can explain. If I could explain it, I'd have a solution straight away, right? But then I think the thing for me is the fact that a lot of students graduate from Oxford and they actually don't have jobs. And the reason why I wanted to talk about African students today is because there's the unique experience of like having to think about visas. So when you're thinking about Oxford and you're in your last semester, one of the things that you're thinking about is, okay, I'm about to get done. My visa expires 2 months, 3 months, or 4 months after I finish my course. What am I going to do? How am I going to access opportunities? And I'm going to start here because I want to talk first about the students that choose to stay in the UK. I will address the students that go back to the continent. And I'll also explain why it's important that we think about the students that choose to stay in the UK, because there's that temptation from a lot of people to be like, oh, but why not just go home? So I will address that. So like when students finish at Oxford, most of the programs are like 9 months, 11 months. That's like an Oxford Masters, 9 months to 12 months. And then for some that are doing like MPhils is 2 years. For those that are doing PhDs, around 3 years, 4 years, thereabout. So people finish. For the master's student, when you finish, in the past, the UK used to have 2 years graduate visa pathways. What that meant is when you finish your master's degree, you didn't necessarily have to have a job. You could actually apply for a graduate visa. And what a graduate visa allows you to do is, in the past, when it was 2 years, it allows you to stay in the UK for 2 years. In that 2 years, you can choose to look for employment opportunities. You could choose to start something of your own. You could choose whatever it is that you're planning to do. It gives you a lot of space without pressure, to look for opportunities, which when you think about it, like that's actually a good thing, right? But there are a lot of challenges with that. So one of the biggest challenges with that is the reality of the cost of that visa. It's so expensive, yo. Like I am saying the master's one is 2 years. The PhD one used to be 3 years. And the thing about the visa is you're paying for the visa itself, but you're also paying for health surcharge, health services, right? And I remember when I applied for my graduate visa, it cost me almost £3,000. So when you start to think about it, it's like a student just finished at Oxford, some of them, majority of them on scholarships, right? So in that 1 year, you were not able to save excessively much because people have responsibilities at home. People are taking care of a lot of things during their time at Oxford. So when you're done, you don't have £3,000 lying around. So a lot of the students don't have money for this visa. So what that means is that all the resources that you would have been saving, majority of them or all of them for some, actually go into this graduate visa. So getting into this graduate visa does not necessarily mean that you will have opportunities lined up for you. It's not always the case. For a lot of people, you might get a job, but for some people, you might actually not get the job in 2 years. So that's the first thing, the high cost of the visa itself, to say, where do you get the money? When you sacrifice everything that you have for that particular visa, the next layer of the problem is the landlord does not care that you are using your money to apply for the graduate visa. There's a reality of you still have to pay rent. And because a lot of people, they're transitioning from like the student accommodation that they were on, now they're transitioning to accommodation that is not necessarily student. So when it's not student accommodation, there are more costs to your renting a space than before. You're now having to pay council tax, which is mandatory if you're not a student. And then now you have to also pay a deposit because you're going into a new lease agreement, right? So imagine someone that just paid £3,000 to get a graduate visa. That person has to think about deposit for a house. Someone has to think about the first month rent for that particular house. It means groceries, it means a lot of things. So you can already see that there's a lot of layers of cost for these people. And if you're on a scholarship, to be honest, a lot of people don't have that much resources. People don't have, money lying around that they can just use for this. And I feel like because we never really think extensively about this unless we're in that situation, it means that a lot of these people don't actually get support. People at home continue to be like, oh, now you're done, you're going to get a job, you're going to send us money. And I'm just like, they actually don't have money, And I think what's very interesting about that is there's a cost of the visa, there's a cost of rentals, there's a cost of council tax and all those other things, food and upkeep for that person, right? And then the next thing that comes in within the conversation about money is once you don't have money, which is for a lot of people when they finish, when you don't have money, it means that while you're looking for what is a job that you're qualified for, a job within your field or a job that you studied for, it means that you're having to think about finding other means of making money before you get that job. So a lot of those people are forced to actually take on jobs that don't exactly align with what they were studying. And this really does break my heart. And I think it's part of why I'm having this conversation today, because I think just the idea that someone can leave the continent, leave a job, leave 10 years of practice, 5 years of practice, come to the UK, study at, the one of the most amazing institutions in the world, and then be done, and then they have to take any kind of job just to get things going. People end up working in supermarkets, people end up working in shops where, you buy your clothes, the people that are staking the shelves and all those things. And I think it's so painful to see, because I don't think that anyone wants that for themselves. I don't think that anyone would choose that if there was a comfortable place to go back to. Like I said, I'm going to speak into the question of why not just go back home, because it comes up a lot when people think about the students that choose to, stay in the UK. But when you start thinking about it, it's like the kind of mental space that someone is at when they have to take whatever is there. This is not to say those jobs are not important. They are important. There are people applying for this job. There are people in those jobs, right? But I'm just thinking about the fact that someone has studied their master's. Most people have a first master's and opted for a second master's. And then you're done with your second master's. You've got 10 years of experience working. And then you don't have a job that tallies with what you were trained for or what you've been working in, and now you're forced to just work in any other space. I just feel like it's just not fair. That's how I feel about it. I just think it's not fair, and a lot of people experience that, which really hurts. So I think we really need to think about these people, and this actually opens up the conversation to the next element I wanted to cover, which basically is about just the mental turmoil that people, just have going on in their life when they finish, the depression, the sadness. And it's all of those things that those people are dealing with. And half the time, they don't actually have communities where they can actually share this, because you're sharing it with your friends that are also experiencing the same thing. We can support each other, but there's only so much that we can support each other with. So the limited support for people that are experiencing this kind of thing means that a lot of people go through those things alone. So there's a lot of depression. Imagine finishing your degree at the best university in the world, and then you're having to go through all of those things. You're caring so much. You can't share so much because people back home don't always understand. Sometimes people don't understand that you're not working. Why you're not working? You're in the UK, right? But I just think that the idea of depression, sadness, and all those things is something that we need to think about, because it means that we also think about the way that we engage our friends, our siblings, our children when they finish their studies at Oxford. It also helps us begin to think about, how much we can ask of them and the kind of support that we can give them. It's not always saying they want your money, but it's also thinking about what other support can I give them that allows them to breathe better, because it's just really a stressful environment. You're stressed about money, you're stressed about upkeep, you're also stressed about jobs, and it's all of those things going on. So I really feel like we need to really think about this a lot more and support our students more. And it comes back to that conversation I said I'm going to have about the fact that people say, why don't you just go back home, as if it's that simple. And I feel like that question is always very strange to deal with, because for those students that leave their countries and they can't go back home, people have different reasons why they choose to stay in the UK. I feel like as someone that's lived in the UK and seeing what the UK is like, I always believe that no one would leave a comfortable place to go stay in the UK and do whatever job in the UK. So people choosing to stay in the UK after their studies means that there is a compelling reason. And I think it's very important for us to recognize that. So instead of coming in and being like, why don't you just go back home? Why don't we sit and recognize the reason why someone is choosing to stay in the UK, right? And also the reason why someone is willing to go through whatever it is that they're going through just so they can get an opportunity, so that they can support their families back home, so that they can chart a new experience and a new path for themselves. So I really feel like that question is also in itself problematic. So anytime someone is telling you about that experience in the UK after their studies, just don't be the person that's asking them, why don't you just go back home? You don't know what home looks like for that person. It's beyond just the politics of people's countries or the economies of people's countries. It's also conversations about the family setups and things that are happening back home that people need to move away from in order to grow forward. So it's like people are not choosing to be in these dire situations just because they enjoy it. No one enjoys that kind of experience. People have reasons, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge those reasons. So I think the support that we give people should also kind of exist within the space of understanding why they're choosing to be there, understanding what they're running away from. And it's not always running away, what they're moving away from, what they're trying to do with their lives by moving away from home. So I wanted to really kind of spell out that conversation because it comes up a lot, and it really just annoys me because I feel like people assume that people would leave their countries. Like I've seen people who genuinely can't go back home, you know, and I feel like they need to be accepted for that, like recognize that that person can't go back home and just be okay with it. Because also the other thing, in a very shady way, it's not your life. I know I'm also asking you guys to think about their life, and I'm saying it's not your life. I think it's important for us to remember that in as much as you see people and you think you're having the same experiences or you have a sense of their experience, I think it's important for you to just recognize that someone is coming from a place that you may never understand until you listen to them. Or even if you listen to them, you may not necessarily understand it. So I think when you start to think differently and better in the way that you respond to people, it might actually help you be relevant to that person, be helpful to that particular person, right? And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, which is so interesting, because this whole conversation about Oxford and after Oxford is so insane because it doesn't even start after Oxford, right? So Oxford has three terms, right, in their academic year. So what happens is that when you get to term 2, towards the middle to the end of term 2, there's this question that comes up a lot when you go to events, whether it's a dinner at college, it's a networking event, it's a seminar, it's a hangout, whatever it is. When you get into the spaces, people are asking you, so you're in your final, almost in your final semester, what's your plan? What are you going to be doing afterwards? I always find it very interesting when people ask that because, Oxford is a very interesting space because the semesters are so short, right? So technically you just finished term 1 and then suddenly someone is asking you, what's your plan? And it's always that thing of people don't necessarily need to have a plan. Some people don't have a plan, and that also should be fine, right? And I feel like it's a thing that exists in the Oxford community. It's not even coming from fellow students, because I think sometimes fellow students understand. But I think it's coming from everywhere. It's strangers you meet in networking events and conferences. It's also, the faculty, the people in colleges. It's everybody asking, like, what's the plan? I don't know how this question can stop because I feel like it's just been there for so long. So it may not necessarily stop. But I feel like it's a very uncomfortable question. What that question does is it assumes that people can show up for 1,000 other things because the intensity of the Oxford, like the curriculum, the kind of schedule that people have, the expectations for their Oxford experience, it's so crazy that you don't have breathing space for a lot of other things, right? So for someone to expect that within all of this chaos where you're trying to focus on the assignments, the exams, the final project, you want to make sure you get the right results to graduate from Oxford, and someone's already asking you, what's your plan? So I know also that this question doesn't always come from, I don't think it comes from a malicious place because no one would ask you that maliciously, right? But I do think that it comes from a good place, but I don't think it lands in the good place because people have different experiences. Some have it figured out, like some have jobs by term 1 or term 2. Others are going back to the same job, so they have a bit of clarity about that. Some people just don't have an idea, and that's also supposed to be fine. At least in my world, I feel like it should be okay. So I think I always have this conversation with students that are at Oxford to say, don't feel under pressure to define your plan, because you may not have the plan. You may not want to deal with the stress and the pressure of having a plan. So don't feel the pressure to respond to that question. You can just respond by changing the subject. You can also just respond by saying, I haven't decided yet, or I haven't started thinking about it. I'll definitely let you know when I do. That's if it's someone that you'll see again. But if it's someone you don't know, just be like, I haven't started thinking about this. What are your thoughts? What ideas do you have? What recommendations do you have? That way, you're not shutting them down. You're creating space for them to engage with you and share with you the thoughts that they have about how you can maneuver it, especially if it's someone that's been through Oxford and they're down, they can give you ideas. So I think the idea of it is to just make sure the person understands that I may not have started thinking about it, or I may not want to think about it right now, but I'm happy to take on suggestions and thought processes around this. So I think it's a very interesting question that will not stop coming in Oxford. But I think the thing that we can do is to think differently about the way that we engage with the question. So if you're a current student, a future student of Oxford University, just be ready to, think about the way that you engage with that question when people ask you, because they're definitely going to ask you, right? And then also beyond that conversation about what are your plans, the other spirit, and I call it a spirit, there's a spirit that exists in Oxford. It's a spirit of grand, pathways. There's people that really are convinced that when you exit Oxford, you need to do this big thing. And I'm always very curious to say, what does big mean for you? Because for someone, to be honest, they're not trying to do this grand thing. And I think I need to clarify that what this person means by grand, they mean to work for like specific institutions, that there's elite institutions that, we perceive or we elevate, places like the UN, the World Bank, UNICEF, and all those big institutions and their headquarters and everything. There's always this idea that leaving Oxford, that's kind of where you need to go. If you're not going there, like, what are you doing with your life? Which I think is very strange in a way, and also problematic when you think about it, because I feel like it's just a lot of pressure to go into those institutions. They're great institutions in their own right, and I think people do want to work there, but what if someone's grant is not working in that institution? What if someone wants to go back to their job and actually do things differently because they have new skills, new experiences, new networks that they're bringing to the workspace? What if they're just wanting to innovate the way that they've been doing their job in their place of employment? What if they want to elevate within their work of employment? And also, what if someone wants to start their own thing? What if someone has an idea that they're trying to pursue? It doesn't look grand for you because it doesn't come with all the financial, benefits and all those big networks. But what if it's the pathway that someone wants to take? And the other one as well is, what if someone's grant is taking a year away from this Oxford experience to just breathe and, to heal? I always tell people that when you finish at Oxford, you need to take a moment to heal. For some people, it's longer. For some, it's shorter. But Oxford is so intense that if you don't take a moment to heal and just jump into the next thing, it can really play you. So you want to be intentional about the space that you create. So what if someone's grant is taking time away from that, post-Oxford stress of work and jobs and big things, to just relax and rest and then re-energize, to start over energized? What if that's their grant? So I think for me, I call it a spirit because I think it's just this misconception of what grant can look like. Grant can look different for everybody. And so don't put pressure on each other to do those crazy things that look big to you, because that might not be the big that someone is looking for. And also, I know, I keep saying that grant can look like going to the same kind of workspace, but in a different environment with a different skill set. But also, grant doesn't have to be the post-Oxford experience. What if you don't want anything grand? Who said it should be grand? I mean, going to Oxford is grand, isn't it? Why am I supposed to be doing grand after grand? What if grand is just existing? What if my presence in that space is grand? For my family, for my, my siblings, for my friends, my community. What if my presence in that space is the grand? What if it's enough? And I think the reason why I'm hammering so much on this is because people put pressure on themselves, right, to go into this grand experience. And I think it's just too much unnecessary pressure. It's nice to work in great institutions if that's the path you want to be on. But if you don't want to be there, that's also okay, right? So I think my advice to current students, especially, and future students, is as you go through Oxford, as you experience how phenomenal it is, because it's an amazing space. There's no question to that. If you follow me on different platforms, I spoke about my Oxford experience. I was very loud about, my experience there and what it did for me. and the currency of the name. The Oxford name is a currency, and if you are able to use that currency, it can do a lot for you. But I think also the thing that you need to think about is, fine, it's this grand institution, but it doesn't mean that I need to be on this, grand after grand thingy. It's just, I don't know. I just think it's a spirit, and as a spirit, spirits can be released from you. Spirits can be changed for better spirits, for better energies. So if you love yourself, I think you need to really be grounded in what is the vision I have for myself, and what does the now look like. It doesn't have to look like everybody's. And also within this conversation, there's also the pressure that people put on each other. Like when you're telling each other, oh, when I finish, I'm going to this place, I got this offer, I'm doing this. And you start looking at your friends, you're like, oh my God, I don't have anything, so maybe I'm not that big. Child, your existence in that space could just be the big that you were looking for. That's also just fine. And I know that I've spoken extensively, and it looks like I'm speaking a lot about the people that are in the UK, choosing to be in the UK and all of this, global spaces. But I also think it applies to people that go back to the continent, whether to go back to the same job or apply for new jobs, or you found a new opportunity and you're going into that. I think it does apply to you as well, because when you go back home, oh my God, the spirit of grand is also there, where people are expecting, like, after this, you must be doing some AA, guys. Like, it's just, I don't know, just resist that spirit. It's not a healthy spirit. It's not a spirit that uplifts you, that motivates you, that allows you to recognize the kind of growth that you've experienced, the kind of power that you hold just by being in that space. So when you go back home, there's always that question of, what are you doing now? Like, what do you mean, what am I doing now? What if I just came back home to breathe and rest a little bit? What if I'm coming back to the space that I was in, but I'm bringing better resources, better skills, better knowledge that can help us do things differently? So I think as you go back home, also go back understanding that you don't owe anyone an explanation of a grand entrance or a grand exit, whatever it is. So I think people really need to own this, because I think it does also come back to affect your mental well-being, because you are under pressure. You don't want to see people because you don't want to answer that question. You're running away from people, but also you will do crazy things just to look like you're doing something grand, which is not cool, because it's not sustainable. So you need to just be honest about the space that you're in, what you're trying to do with yourself. And all of this that I've said today does not mean that you shouldn't have an intentional mindset around your growth. I think the argument I'm passing here is that the big picture remains the same. Like, the vision of your life is, constant, but the how to get there, when you get there, the pace that you're at, those things can be adjusted. So I think the mind I want you to have is, as you go through Oxford, as you think about life after Oxford, what you want to have in place is the recognition that I'm finishing in June next year. If I'm going to be in the UK, I need to have a visa, so I need to start thinking about resources for it. If I'm going back home and I want to do work, I want to be thinking about starting to reconnect with the people that I was with, or the people that I know in the network, looking for opportunities, or I'm starting to look for new opportunities and things like that. So mentally, you recognize that you need to be thinking a certain way, but you're not putting yourself under pressure to have it all figured out. Nobody has it figured out. And that's the health, I think, of this life. You don't need to have to figure it out. And I think the last thing I would say here is, one of the things that I think I did very well when I was thinking about my post-Oxford experience was having conversations with people that are important to me, because I was very cognizant of where I was coming from, and there are things I didn't want to do the same way. Like, for me, I'd taken a break from like my workspace a year before I went to Oxford. So I knew, like, mentally the kind of space I wanted to occupy, the kind of growth I wanted to see. So I think recognizing that helped me a lot to slow down and not put myself under pressure, and to also feel like I can go through a certain level of growth without it looking a certain way. And I think I'm grateful for that, because I think I'm happier, after my Oxford experience. Like, I'm so happy. I'm in a space of growth. I'm doing amazing things. I'm occupying a space that is very meaningful for me. It's empowering for me. It's inspiring for me and inspiring the people around me. So I think for me, just that recognition was very important, and also just being grounded in, this is what I want to do with my life. This is how I want to do my life. One thing that I do very consistently is to honor my vision. Like, for me, what comes first is my vision. Where is Mantate trying to go in the long term, in the greater scheme of life? What kind of effect am I trying to have in the world? I think having that in the picture then means that I think differently about how do I get there and the pressure I give myself to get there. So I think for me, it was very useful that I recognized that. And even now, when I talk to current students that are thinking about their life after Oxford, it's even better when I'm telling them how to think about their own life or what to do, because I managed to think about things differently. This doesn't make me any different from a lot of people or any better, because I feel like this thing is a hit or a miss. You might get it right, you might get it wrong, and that's the point of life. We keep learning. But I'm really grateful that I managed to think differently about, the things that I wanted to do, how I wanted to do them. And I think the biggest thing for me, like I said, was having conversations, talking to the people that mattered to me, the people I met in Oxford, the people that I had back home, the people in global spaces that were doing work that inspires me, the mentors I had, the friends I had. I had a lot of conversations about my journey, and that helped me a lot. I think sometimes you want to go through things on your own. Me, I'm a happy person, guys. I like being happy. I don't want stress. Like, stress is something that I don't enjoy. No one enjoys it, but I try to not be stressed by things I can control. So if I don't need that kind of stress, I might just block it. So I think that's one reason why I really talk to the people that matter to me about the way that I'm thinking about things, the fears I have. And a lot of my friends were anchoring me, and there are things that they said to me that really grounded me when I was feeling like, I'm losing my ways, And I always use the example of a friend of mine that I won't mention, but I remember there was a moment when I was doing my field work in Zim where there was always this question of like, what do you want to do? What does your grand look like? And I was having a conversation with him about the fact that God has always been so consistent in creating space for me. And for the first time, I'm starting to push God to be a bit quick about it. And, one of the things that he said was, be careful, of these carrots that are dangling in front of the donkey in you. And that wasn't even said in an insulting way, but it was this idea of these carrots that we see, this, this low-hanging fruits, whatever you see in front of you. And because you're so under pressure to be doing something, you just take whatever is there. So that's one thing that you say that was very important to me, to say, don't take whatever is there, because there was so much on the table that didn't align with what I was trying to do. So that was a very grounding reminder. And the second thing that they mentioned, no, this was not the same person. It was a different mentor of mine. He sent me a message on WhatsApp and said, it was a powerful statement, but it was so short. He said to me, don't forget who you are. And I always say, like, that was such a powerful thing, because he didn't even know what was happening in my journey, what I was thinking about, that I was about to finish, and all of those things. He just sent me a message and said, don't forget who you are. And that was important for me, because I then sat down and I say to myself, this is who I've been. This is what God has been doing in my life. This is what God continues to do in my life. This is the vision I've had for myself. This is how far I've come with that vision. So it means that I'll keep, going up, because the only way is up, right? So I think it was very helpful for me. And I'm very, very intentional about the networks that I keep, the people that I keep in my life, the affirmations that they pass into my journey, the words they speak into my life. They're very elevating, they're inspiring, and they hold me even in instances where they don't recognize that I actually need some holding down. So I hope this conversation, because I know we've spoken about a lot of things, and I'm actually glad that I managed to cover everything. I hope this conversation was useful to you. It's a very important conversation, clearly, to me, because it's something that affects a lot of African students that go to these amazing institutions in the world. It may not be Oxford. It might be the same thing in Cambridge, in another university. It's not just Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard and whatever. It's also just generally institutions in the world. People leave their countries to go to those spaces, and there's a perception of what life can look like after that. But it's a very different experience, and I think people need to go there ready. But people that are back home as well, you need to also start to think differently and engage differently with your people, with your friends, with your comrades about, their life afterwards. Be kind to people, be very empathetic, be very sensitive to, moments that people may not necessarily need the kind of energy you're trying to give them. When you start thinking this way, I think that you can be very helpful to people. You can empower them more. You can also give them space to breathe, because sometimes as they go through this depression, the sadness, whatever it is that they're going through, sometimes just not being stressed can just be the space for breathing. Just someone not coming into your space and just throwing unnecessary shade or unnecessary pressure on you. It could just be the space you're looking for. So I hope this conversation helps you begin to see that, it's amazing to go to Oxford. I mean, it's one of the best experiences of my life. There's no question about that. It's very amazing to, go through the experience and meet the people that you meet, go through the kind of training and growth that you go through. But it's also real to think about the life afterwards. And I hope beyond just us treating each other differently and better, I also hope it challenges institutions in the continent and in the world as well, hoping that this gets to their ears somehow. But I also think the conversations that we have around this podcast, this episode, I hope it's conversations that end up in spaces where people that have influence, that have institutions, companies, that have projects and whatever it is that they have that is looking for talent can begin to think about, students coming out of these institutions and not just sitting back and maybe thinking that, there's this lineup of companies and big institutions that are looking to recruit them, but just thinking about how do I create space in my own kind of institution or space or project to actually take on someone and give them an opportunity. It's not just about, employment. It could just be like an internship. It could be like a transitions program. It could be just collaborating with them. It could be supporting them with a new idea that they have, the new project that they have, by giving them money, training, resources, mentorship, whatever it is. So yeah, I hope that this was a worthy first episode. It does feel like it was for me. And I think for me, in everything I do, as long as I'm fulfilled, I feel like I've done what I needed to do. That's the bigger win for me. But I hope beyond my feeling like it was a great conversation, I hope that you found this very helpful. I'd love for you guys to do a couple of things for me. One of them is, if you've gone through Oxford or similar institutions and you've got an experience to share, please send, your story. If you want it to be anonymous, you can send it to me on my DM, and then I can then share it anonymously to my audience. You can also just share in the comment section your thoughts. You also don't have to be someone that went through these institutions. It could be that you're back home and you're realizing, oh my God, my cousin went through that, or my sister went through that, or my brother went, or my son went through that. If you're someone that has that kind of experience, you can share that in the comment section, in the reply section, depending on where you are. But obviously, like I said as well, when people share with me, I'll definitely come back to share with you guys. And then the other thing I will do is I'm going to ask a couple of people that have gone through Oxford, especially, that have figured themselves out, some that took longer or that figured themselves straight afterwards. I'm going to ask them to share their experiences. And what I will do is I will come again anonymously if they want. I will come back to my Instagram page and actually share with you guys some of these experiences and their stories. I think it's very important for us to, keep this conversation going. So yeah, I hope that you leave a comment, reply, that you share this with somebody, because I think a lot of people can benefit from just listening to this conversation. But obviously, most importantly, I want you to subscribe, because like I said at the beginning, I'm trying to build a community so that we have conversations like this and, begin to think differently, think better, experience life better and differently. And also follow me on Instagram. My Instagram page for this podcast is called The Mantate Show. Just follow me there. I'll be sharing a lot of things. But I hope that, you enjoyed this conversation, you enjoyed this episode, that it was worth your time, because I feel like it was worth my time. And ultimately, I think that's the most important part. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. It's your girl, Mantate Mloja, and this is The Mantate Show. See you guys next time in my second episode. Bye.